Okay, here we are in the campgrounds of Sesquicentenial State Park. Couple of comments before we get going too far, a couple of things to watch out for. This is the only state park campground that I have ever been locked out of because I didn't know the password or the gate code and arrived after hours, so make sure you get the code. Second, you'll notice more on the second loop than on the first loop, but the trees are really close to the road. Be very careful with a larger camper. Alright, space number 1 is the host space. We do not have a host here this weekend, but it's a nice big space, nice and level. Has a sewer connection, so if it's available, that can be a nice spot to have. Fairly easy in and out. Space number 2, kind of down in a hole, short space. Not bad for a tent. A few tree roots here and there. Not big enough for much of a camper. This is a campground that you do kind of need to look at the video and see what you think. Their space dimensions are not as accurate as some campgrounds. They'll tell you can get a big camper in when you really can't. This is space number 3. Nice tent spot. It doesn't get flat until you get back in it a pretty good ways. And it's got trees in it that make it hard to get in and turn once you're in it. But a nice open spot, and again, room for tents and flat spots for tents. Space 4. Reasonably flat. Very short. A good place to put a couple of tents, maybe. And not much room for any kind of camper, but a couple of tents would probably be okay. Space 5. Nothing level about this one, and plenty of tree roots in the driveway. Again, there's room around the space to put some tents. And if nobody's home, it would make a nice pull through to the space at the other end, but not something you can count on. Space 6. I got a large pickup truck with a utility bed on it, filling up the whole space. And they're pretty much taking up the whole space. We'll go ahead and do space 8, and there's their camper, and it's taking up their whole space. So again, not very big. Space 7 is a true pull-through spot. Reasonably flat. A little bit of flat spot around it, maybe for a tent. Maybe enough flat spot in the campsite for a tent. Notice the trees on the exit of the campsite. Might be a little difficult with a long camper. I think you could get a long camper in the campsite, but getting out might be a little bit tight. Space 9. Nice little wooded spot. No extra space for a tent beside the campsite. Oh, the only place in the campsite really flat enough for a tent is right up against the fire pit. Plenty of tree roots. Not very flat ground in the campsite. Space 10. Occupied, but they haven't filled that campsite up, so plenty of room in that campsite for a larger camper. Space 12. Another large trailer. Nice campsite. Space 11 is the other half of Space 7 as a pull-through, but it's a nice size space. Again, not very level. Slight uphill grade into the campsite. Plenty of tree roots. And I don't think access would be bad even with that tree. I don't think that tree would be a problem. Let's see, I don't think I missed one. I think 14 is the one with the trailer in it. Although it really looks like there's another one right here. Yes, there is. Okay, Space 14. Nice deep space. Kind of tight. Trees are a little bit in the way. I think, based on some other signs I have seen in the campground, that 4x4 before the picnic bench is telling you that you're not allowed to camp behind it, even though those are really nice spaces behind it. This little leaning tree might make getting in and out a little hairy with a bigger camper. Space 13. Easy access. Fairly flat. Plenty of tree roots. The best place to put a tent would be all the way back here at the transformer. But I think it would make a nice campsite for tents or pretty much any size camper. The live oak on the corner of the campsite, I don't think would make it too hard to get into. That one curved branch might make it a little complicated, but shouldn't be too bad. Space 16. Easy access. A little crowded with the trees, but not too bad. Fairly open when you get inside. Again, I don't know where in the world you'd put a tent, but not bad for a camper. And none of these have been really big enough for a 40-foot trailer, but anything in the lower 30s would probably be fine. And Space 17 has a camper in it. Nice open space, lots of room. Kind of a mud hole getting in it, but not too bad. I don't know that you can see the open field with the sunshine. We'll back up and get out of the sun a little bit. This is an open area around the bathhouse. You could probably get a tent or two in if you needed to. There's a nice campfire ring in the middle. An old payphone just in case you need to make a phone call. Probably doesn't work. And the bathhouse. Space 18. Nice wide open space when you get in here. Not terribly deep. Another one of these looks like, I mean, it's got a nice flat spot for a tent, but if it rains real hard, I'm not so sure you wouldn't be in a puddle. This is one of the more private spots in the campground. Nice and shaded. Space 20, I guess you would call a pull through. And also back in. The tree in the middle makes it a little complicated to pull through, but not a bad spot for whatever you want to put in it. We go back to space 19. Fairly open. And just because there are no trees in the back, you could get whatever you want in here. The depth of the campsite is not an issue for any size camper. The trees in the corner in a slight curve might be a little complicated. And this mud hole at the entrance if it's rained. Let's see, if we turn around and look back at 19, you can see the trees in the way. There's probably enough room over here under the bushes that you could get it, yeah, even a large camper turned into that space. So anyway, space 22 is occupied by a large camper. Obviously a nice big spot. And 23 is occupied by a camper and a screen room and lots of other stuff. Plenty of room in that space. And I guess this is not part of it, so that must be 25 right up against it. I think I have my numbers messed up. I think this second spot is 23. The one with the camper in it must be 21. So we'll ride back and look and make sure. Yes, the camper is 21. So the empty spot is 23. Slight uphill grade into it. Plenty of tree roots. I think you could put a tent up by the power, the transformer. Fairly level spot, but not really. I mean, it's a slight uphill into the campsite. Space 24. Nice open spot. Fairly deep. This leaning tree kind of gets in the way if you've got a really long camper. Keeps you from staying all the way to the side of the campsite. This campsite actually looks like it has a nice spot to put a tent under a leaning tree, but the tree does appear to be healthy, so I think that would be okay. But it's a nice wide open space. I think easy access for any size camper. Space 25. Another one that slopes up slightly into the site. Not much of a place to put a tent, but an open space and large enough for a mid-sized camper. Space 26. I can't tell if it's a pull-through or a back-in or just kind of whatever you want to do with it, I guess. And it's just a spot off the side of the road. And then back in the back, I mean, there is room for a tent. There's what appears to be a dry creek bed. So I guess if it rains hard, that's where all the water is going to go, right through your campsite. Next to that is a closed access to another loop, perhaps a primitive campsite. I see a big fire ring, several picnic tables, but a locked gate, so I'm not sure what that is. Space 28 is occupied. This is space 27. Based on where the power is and the direction that it's turned, I'm not sure they didn't think you backed in from the direction I'm looking now. There is room for a tent right here in the middle. It's not level, but close enough. But I don't know how you'd get any camper in here of any size unless you unhitched it and pushed it. Here's space 29. A little bit of downhill into the space. Nice open spot once you get in here. Fire pit's on the wrong side of the space. Flat enough and root free enough to set up several tents. But my bike tires are sinking in the sand just a little bit, so it might be hard to set too much up in it. And this is space 30. Let's see, and look back at 29 is again wide open. A slope downhill, but not too bad. Space 30, a slight slope in. There's room here in the back for a tent, and room for pretty much any size camper that you would like to back in, and I think access to get it pointed in the right direction and get it in here. Because the power line that runs through the back of these sites, the next few on the outside loop, there are less trees. And here in Columbia, direct sunshine means hot. Space 31. bit of a grade drop to get in off of the road. The space itself, a slight slope downhill to the back, but not too bad. A power pole and a guy wire in the back of your campsite. But nice woods behind you. Space 32. Fairly small, nice flat spot. I think you could put a tent right here in the middle. This space seems to be a little muddier than most of mine. It is sandy, but it seems to have mud mixed in with the sand. And some really big tree roots at the entrance. That might be fun to get a camper over and in. Space 33. Easy access for backing in. Doesn't look like much of a driveway, but I think it's a fine driveway. Gentle slope up in. Plenty of roots when you get into the space. Not a very good place in here to put a tent, unless you spread out towards the other campsites a little bit. But aiming into the space with a trailer would certainly be easy. Space is reasonably flat when you're in it, but it does have a little bit of a steep spot at the beginning. A long trailer might be hard to get level. And the straight shot seems to be through a possible mud hole. Space 34 starts with a mud hole. I think that one's not a possibility. I think that one is. Obviously a bunch of wash through this campsite when it rains. Slopes all the way up in. You could probably put a tent around the edge if all your buddies or all your neighbors don't have tents set up. And there's room for pretty much any length trailer you might want to bring in here, provided you can get it level, because it does slope all the way uphill into it, and the access is through a mud puddle. Space 35. No mud puddle. I think you could get anything turned into here. Again, not level, but you could back in here as far as you want. That tree is tall enough. I think you can get under it with anything you might want to get under it with. And there is a flat area up above it. Flat enough area back here in the back to set up a tent, or 3 or 4 tents. With plenty of tree roots in the campsite. Alright, and that's the last space in the front loop. And as you pull out, back where we started from, the dump station is up on the right. You can also see the nice block pillars on either side of the entrance, just to warn you of all the fun things to come with lack of space for a long camper. And from there we'll ride back to the point where the back loop turns off. Alright, so right off of space number 9, we turn into the back loop. Now notice on this loop, as we go around, how narrow the road will get. I will try and remember to slow down and point it out as we get there. Alright, space number 36. An easy back in, nice big wide space, plenty of gravel, flat, not much of a place for a tent, but a nice spot for a camper. And 37. Similar to 36, only shorter. Again, nice gravel, nice flat spot. A little bit of place to maybe put a tent, although it's not very flat. Space number 38. Easy access with a camper, but it's not flat, not level. But a decent sized space if you've got the ability to get level. This area in the back, plenty of pine straw, but again, not very level even for a tent. But getting in and out should be easy. Space number 39. I don't believe that one's made for a camper at all. And really not much of a flat spot to put a tent. Alright, space 40, I will look at 40 first. It's the handicap spot. Somewhat flat. Big enough for a reasonable sized camper. Obviously room for a couple of tents. Not real flat, but functional. And this is space 41, I believe. Yes, 41. I'm not quite sure what kind of pull through this amounts to. Thank you. 41. Fairly flat down here in the bottom, but you're gonna get water running through camp if it rains real hard. Obviously you won't get a camper down here, but you can put one up top, and this does appear to be a pull through. But we'll leave the kids with water guns alone so they don't squirt me too much. Hey there, puppy. Hey there. 42 has tent pads on it and room for more tents. They've got a crowd between 2 dogs and the kids and the tents. 44 is another handicap spot. Some of the campgrounds we have visited handicap includes concrete walks to the bathhouse. This one does not. It's just a short distance to the bathhouse. The site itself is reasonably flat. The driveway in is not too bad. A little bit of a potential mud hole at the bottom, but you can stay in the grass and miss that. 43. Got a nice tent pad. Nice gravel up to the tent pad. Oh, hey there. And room down in the bottom for more tents, but again, if it rains, you're gonna get wet. You could get a small camper in here, but the 2 trees at the entrance might make it a little difficult if you don't back well. And it may be listed as a tent site, in case y'all haven't figured out. It's a little confusing for me to try and do that at the same time I'm looking at campsites. So you basically get a description based on putting a camper in it, whether that's what it was meant for or not. 46 has a tent pad and some more space to put another tent or 2 if you wanted to. Has power and water, so you could put a camper in it, and you could get a short camper in here. There's actually room to get a camper in. $45. Another tent pad. Lots of tent space back in the woods between these next few. I have been here once with what looked like about 100 Cub Scouts all camping back in the woods. So lots of room for several tents. Again, you could get a small camper in here, but it's not level. It's downhill all the way in, so you're going to have a hard time getting it level. Space 47. Obviously plenty of room for a decent sized camper, and the ability to get it level. And 47 is a pull through. Let's see, 48 has a nice camper and golf cart, nice space. Hi. This would be 49, also a pull through. And the end of this area that I mentioned had all the Cub Scouts in it. Seems to end about where this picnic table is. It's a pull through, but you're not going to pull much through here with the turn in the trees. My camper's not huge, and I don't think I'd want to try it. Space 50. Looks to me like they might call this one a pull through as well. But it's a fairly flat. You might find a place to put a tent. You'd have a hard time leveling a motorhome of any size, but I think you could get a trailer level. Again, I don't think you'll pull through it. You might be able to back in this side but it would be tough. Space 51. I kind of like that space, but then that's my space. Plenty of room for any size camper you would want to put in it. Fairly easy access into it, fairly level. There is a tree on the corner, but not real hard to get around and get anything in that you would want to get in. Space 52 has a decent sized camper in it. Nice easy back end spot. And lots of room to spread out. Space 53. Another large site, as you can see by the large camper that's in the process of getting pulled in. A little sandy muddy at the entrance to it. 54 is a decent sized spot, but downhill all the way in. Might be a flat enough spot back here to set up a tent, but unless it's a short camper, you're going to have a hard time getting it level. Alright, apparently they don't like spot number 53. But as you see them drive up and around the corners, you can start to see some of the tight corners around the trees. And hopefully it's not getting too dark to see these spaces. I'm filming this late in the afternoon, early evening, because it's too hot in this place in the middle of the day. But then we're here in July. Not out of choice. Unfortunately, despite the fact that I enjoy Clemson so much, I have a child who thinks South Carolina is a good place to go to school. So we're here for orientation. Anyway, that was Space 55, which is a nice big spot. And you could get anything in there you wanted to get in there. It's not flat, but I think you could get any kind of trailer level. 57 is a little bitty spot. Tight turn with two trees at the end of it. Better suited for tents than trailers. Or maybe a small Class C. 56. Nice little pull through. Lots of room outside your door. Lots of private space. '58. Nice, fairly flat. Good place to put a tent. Somebody has blown the pine needles or raked them, but a nice space. Room for one or two tents on flat ground, or a decent sized camper in here. Kind of a sharp turn in, but if nobody's using this other space, you can cut the corner a little bit. Space 59. Nice big open space. Fairly flat. A little bit of slope, cross slope. Room for several tents. Room to spread out. And an easy shot into the campsite. to back in from the road. Space 60. Might be a pull through. But not a bad back end for a small camper. It's uphill all the way through the site the way that I just came through it. Not much of a place for a tent, but I think you could make it work if you had to. Space 61. Lots of room for tents. There is a place to put a camper. With a nice easy back in. And there is a tree on the side, but it's a straight shot off the road, so not a huge problem to get into. '62, as you can see, slopes. And from the entrance in, it's downhill all the way in, and depending on where you set up, has a little bit of a cross slope. It's so parallel to the road that your picnic table really needs to be over by the road instead of where it is if you've got a camper in here. And if you've got a tent, I don't really know where you put it. Maybe in that hole down there that probably belongs to the neighbor's campsite. And then again, I may be more picky than most people with where I set my tent. Space 63. Nice big space. Reasonably flat. Watch the tree roots, you stub your toes. But a nice big open spot, room for tents, campers, or whatever. Space 64 is right next door. Not as big of a spot, but you know, if you back all the way into the back of it. Hi. Okay, continue with this space. After visiting with the neighbors, this is a nice wide deep space, fairly level, kind of close to your neighbors. Obviously space 66 is a big space since they're set up with their tent in the back and 40-foot camper in the middle of the space and plenty of room to spare and an easy in and out. It's a nice big space. Space 65. You can put a tent on it. You won't get anything else in there. All gravel. Nothing flat. Might be able to get a hammock or two in here. I don't know about anything else. Yeah, that's a lovely space. That really is a nice big spot. I like that. 68. Easy access, gravel drive, reasonably flat. A little bit of uphill into the space. Room to open up and come outside your camper. Places around the back edge to put a tent. Nice tree cover. Very open to your neighbors, but all the campsites here seem to be that way. Space 67. Again, large campers in the spot. And plenty of room for that camper. Not much of a flat spot for a tent. Space 69. Fairly easy access. Gravel. Nice deep space. Plenty of flat space around it for tents. Very nice space. Tree at both sides of the entrance, but plenty of room to get between them and a nice straight shot in. Space 70, reasonably wide, fairly level, all gravel. Not much of a place to put a tent, but you could get a decent camper in here. You could get a 25 in here and still get a car across the front of it without too much trouble. This might be a good place to look at some of the trees that you have to deal with in the road. As you see, the road is not straight. It's got some nice curves in it, and I really think they curved the road around the trees, which is not ideal for somebody with a long camper. Getting through this place can be really tight, and because some of the campsites are so short and people park their cars out along the edge of the road, that can make it even worse. Alright, site number 72. A gentle slope up into the site. Fairly level, but not very flat. It's got a lot of bumps in it. Good places to put tents. Plenty of area for tents. Getting in this spot might be a little tough with anything other than short because of the tree directly in front of me. When the driveway is over to this side. Space 71. You see some nice deep space. They've got the truck still hooked to the camper, and room for another car in front of that. So lots of room, wide, really wide back behind them. Nice space. Let's see, and in between, we have a horseshoe pit back here behind the campsites. I thought it looked like a nice place to put a tent, but I don't guess so with horseshoes going on around it. Space 74. I don't know what all is 74. This thing is large. Lots of woods around it. You could back all the way back into here, which is a lot longer than any camper. It appears that there's a place to put 2 campers. Now, you might have a little trouble getting back in because, again, there's a tree right in the corner. You might have to kind of split the corner to get in, but it's a nice big spot. Number 73. Kind of an interesting spot. Back in off the road and then turn and go the other direction. And it is not a pull-through. I don't believe I'd want to do it with a very big camper. Decent tent spot. There's room here for several tents. It does seem to hold a little bit of water and wash a little bit, but not too bad. And a short camper would not be a problem to get in. $75. Not level. It's got a decent amount of cross slope to it. Not any really good places to put a tent. Fairly short. And not only does it turn to get in, but there's a tree in the corner that makes it even harder to make that turn and get lined up with anything. So a small motorhome or a small camper. Again, not flat enough to want to put a tent on, so keep it small. Let's see, this space is 76. I think it might be a pull through. I think you could come right in here and pull right through and out the other side. Not any place in here really flat enough for a tent, maybe back up in the woods. But you could get a camper in here. I don't know about a really big camper, but you could get a camper in here. And depending on how much it has washed, how much it's rained, getting in and out might be a little more difficult. Oops. The next spot is 78. You could probably put a tent over here on a flat spot, right up against your campfire. Maybe a tent right there, but it's not flat. A short camper would come in here okay, but somebody stuck the water out here to protect this tree, which makes it even harder to get into kind of a tight spot. Keep it small. Space 77. Nice big spot. Deep enough for any size camper you would want to put in it. Acceptable width. The area around it is not really flat enough for tents, but the space itself is flat enough you could put a couple of tents. And you might be able to put some down at the bathhouse, but who wants to be in a tent right outside the door of the bathhouse? But I think you could put a couple of tents in this space if you work around a few roots. The space is big enough for any kind of camper you would want to bring in, but good luck fighting the corner up here. With all these trees. And you've got one tree on this side and more on the other. Space 79 is a long pull through. It's a pretty good sized open space. Not much of a tent site. I think if you pulled straight in and turned late, you could get just about anything in here. It's a little crowded between the trees, but not awful. And the bathhouse is right across the street, which is nice for some folks. Also a good spot to back in. You could get just about anything you wanted backed into this spot without too much trouble, and then park your car over there. So I think this one could handle whatever you wanted to bring into it. Space 80. Downhill all the way in, and no shortage of trees around it. Not really a very good place to put a camper. It's got cross slope both ways and slope downhill into the campsite. Full of roots. Nothing flat enough to want to put a tent on. Nothing flat enough to want to put a camper on. Unless it's a little bitty short trailer that is easy to get level. Okay, and plenty of roots in a driveway. Alright, and that spot was our first handicap spot we looked at. Space 81. Little dip getting into it, but fairly decent once you're in. The campsite itself, you might find enough flat spot to put a tent back in here around the edges. Pretty much any size camper would come in without a problem. We have a sign here. So, camping is prohibited beyond this point. So no camping back in the woods. Oh well. No setting up tents back there in the woods where it's nice and flat, although it does slope downhill. But this area up here is sufficient for a tent or two. The next couple of spots are occupied, and they have loaded them up with screen rooms and covers and campers and all kinds of stuff. And that's space 82. And you can see that's a large camper, but you can also see what it takes to get level in one of these spaces. The back is almost on the ground and the front's up pretty high. Hello. Alright, here's a nice spot. Nice sized motorhome backed way in the spot and lots of room left over. That's spot 83. 84 has room for a truck and a motorhome. Oh, you can go ahead.
No, it's fine, you can go.
Thank you. Alright, and that's all the campsites. And that brings us back out to our main loop, and it's probably too dark to see. So that will conclude our full tour of Sesquicentenial State Park.